morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to Simplilearn. We are honored to have you join us today for Radical Analytics, Uncover Blind Spots in Your Organization's Data Pyramid with your host, Stefan Hamel. My name is Richard, and after this intro, I'll be mostly in the background helping Stefan so that everything goes smoothly until the last 15 minutes where we'll do the question and answer and try to answer all the questions we can during the session. Radical Analytics, Uncover Blind Spots in Your Organization's Data Pyramid. Web and digital analytics for over the 10 years has been in an infant stage, just at the beginning. Some of it works, some of it is still not working, but we're still using them. And the question is, where can we grow the industry and where does it need to be improved? If you do not know Stefan is a seasoned independent consultant and distinguished thought leader in the fields of digital analytics, recognized as a Google product strategy expert, and considered one of the most influential industry contributors by the Digital Analytics Association. Well, that's a mouthful. He has made significant contributions to the industry, including creating the Digital Analytics Maturity Model and the Web Analytics Solution Profiler, WASP, quality assurance tool, as well as other tools and concepts throughout the years. Stefan previously had a leadership position with the award-winning Cardinal Pathogency board positions with the DAA. Stefan has taught hundreds of students and co-manages the largest Google Analytics user community on Google+, and serves on a number of advisory boards for agencies, startups, and vendors in the digital analytics industry. We're really lucky to have Stefan today here in his expertise. For those who aren't familiar with this form of webinar, I want to introduce you to your dashboard. If everyone could locate your dashboard, and then locate the question module, and go ahead and type in hello in the question module. You might have to click on the red arrow to re-expand it if it's minimized. This lets us know that you're listening, that you can hear us okay, and the speaker systems are up. Gives us a chance just to double check everything on our side. And thank you for being here, Andrew, Tomas. Great to have you. We're excited to have everybody here today. This is going to be your best friend during the webinar. If you can go ahead and just pull up your questions and go ahead and put them in there. Anything about your own career choice, the company you're in, your own personal path. We have a nice, wonderful professional today who's going to help with those questions, and at the end, the last 15 minutes, we'll go through a question and answer period, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can. And again, Carl, thank you. Hello, Enroll SP. I'm not sure who that is. All good morning. If you hear something awesome, brilliant, interesting, insightful, and you want to share it in your social channels, whatever your social channels are, Facebook, LinkedIn, tweet, you can use the hashtag SLWebinars. That way people can find it and you'll make them wish they were here. You didn't come here to listen to me. I'm proud to introduce Stefan, who'll be your host for Radical Analytics, Uncover Blind Spots in Your Organization's Data Pyramid. Go ahead and sit back, relax, have a cup of coffee, tea, or if it's evening where you're at, maybe a glass of wine, and enjoy. It's an honor for me to hand this over to Stefan. Thank you and happy learning. Hello, Stefan, and welcome to Simplilearn today.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I am doing excellent this, for me, wonderful morning. Let me go ahead and hand this.
To have people from, I think we have people from India, we have people from a little bit all over, so that's pretty exciting.
Yes, oh, I love that part about this job. We get to see such an array of people across the globe. Definitely global learning. Let me go ahead and put myself and let you get started.
All right, thank you. So let's go with this topic of radical analytics, where we're going to go through a number of points that I've been uncovering over the years. So we've been, as an industry, we've been doing web analytics or digital analytics for a good 10 years. And over those years, there's things that works, and there's sadly many things that still don't work, even after 10 years. So we're going to talk about the concept of radical analytics, which is something I've put forward based on my own research and my own interest in the field. So what is radical analytics? Then we're going to look at how we can apply the concept to define some goals and KPIs. And of course, what I want you to have in mind is that nothing is perfect. So I'm going to make some suggestions. I'm going to talk about some examples. But really what's the most important is your critical thinking. Don't take everything for granted. There's no magic recipe. But hopefully there are some good ideas that you're going to be able to learn and apply in your own environment. So One of the things that I've learned, and if you have some experience in web analytics or if you are in digital marketing, one of the questions we always ask is, what are your objectives? And it usually starts with, well, are we talking about a business objective? Are we talking about maybe my own manager's objectives? Or are we talking about maybe something that is more personal in my professional life or even my personal life, about a personal objective? So how do we start? Where do we go with that? How do we start? We've heard about SMART objectives, how to define an objective that would be simple and measurable, and the acronym is pretty well known. Yet in the field, I rarely see people actually going through all of the steps required to define a SMART objective, even if we know that it would be very useful. Then there's other techniques like the 5W and 1H, which is a bit like what investigators would do in the police or journalists. They would they would try to make a story where they understand what is the subject matter, who is involved, when was it, where it was, why it happened, and how it happened. So this would be an investigation technique to define objective, which might be useful. Then politics gets involved, and we have to make up an objective. We have to guess what is the objective, and we get asked, if you could do something like this, would you have something to celebrate? Or simply, how is your manager's bonus determined? So all of that I've heard, and many other examples of how we try to define objective. The simple truth is that when we ask someone, either my clients or when I talk to other people, I ask them, what's your objective? Usually they simply don't know. They will make up something. They will think of something to define it, because they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look dumb. So if you ask someone, what's your objective, rest assured that they will tell you something. Maybe not the right thing, but you're going to be stuck with that because you just opened the door. So I've seen that so often that I started thinking, okay, well, there's something wrong here. We need to do something about it. If we take another example, we've heard about the concept of the elevator pitch. And as a digital analyst, as a marketer, you need to bring value to the organization. And if I was to ask you, what is your current measurement framework and analysis process? What are the steps that you go through in order to bring value to the organization? Well, most likely, it's not something that you always think about. Then there was this other interesting point recently. Someone asked, what is your #1 strategy to define actionable KPIs? So in theory, if we, as an industry, if we've been working and trying to define KPIs for the past 10 to 15 years, and even longer than that, because KPIs existed long before the web, right? So we should have a recipe. We should have clearly defined steps to define good, great KPIs that are really relevant. Well, the reality is, when 42 different people were asked, and 42 people who are seasoned people in the industry, they were asked what is their #1 strategy. I was really, really surprised to see 42 different answers. So even as a group, even as an industry, we haven't figured out how to define great KPIs. This is really troublesome. So that's why I came out with the concept of radical analytics. And at first, some people said, well, isn't it a bit too radical? Isn't it a bit too punchy or too hard? Well, I think that the important aspect is we're talking about a radical overhaul of the existing framework. So what can we do differently in order to have greater success? So if we've been doing it the same way for a number of years and it doesn't work, maybe it's about time that we try something different. And all of this work stems from the work that I've done on the concept of digital analytics maturity since 2009. So back in the days, in 2009, I was completing my MBA, and in the industry, the word was web analytics is hard. And I couldn't accept that statement. For me, if something is hard, if something is difficult, it's just a good challenge. It means there's an opportunity to do something different. So I was more of the school of thought that, okay, maybe it's hard, maybe it's difficult, but what are we doing about it? And studying what other maturity models, other concepts, I came up with a proposal for the digital analytics maturity model, which at first maybe wasn't received in the market in a way that I was really expecting. But recently, over the recent years, everybody talks about maturity, which is interesting because it took all that time to get there. And in the concept of digital analytics maturity, you have 5 areas, and coincidentally, if you are able to align all of those 5 attributes, you're going to be a superstar in this digital analytics industry. So the first one is governance, culture, and adoption. So what is the current governance? What is the current, is the organization data-driven? That's usually what we say. So we start from somewhere. The second dimension is what is the scope? What is the playing field that is involved? Are you trying to optimize and measure just marketing campaigns, or are you trying to do it globally for several brands across different products with tons of different stakeholders? So the scope is the size of the playing field. And of course, how do you define your objective? What does success look like? Then the third one is the team and the expertise. Which kind of resources do you have? Do you have a great team internally? What kind of training do you need? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Do you need to rely on external consultants and other partners? Then the other one is, what is the continuous improvement process and methodology that you use to do analytics? And there's a benchmark that I've created, and honestly, this area is always the weakest spot. So we have difficulties being systematic and being able to, when we find the right way to do something, being able to reproduce success, reproduce the same steps. Then we go into the last one, which is about the tools, the data, and the technology. So none of those 5 areas is more important than another, but I would say that the technology you use, and the tools you have, and the data you have, is not a strong, will not have a strong impact on your ability to bring value to the organization. It's not about the tools you have, it's about your ability to leverage those tools. So I've seen organizations do amazing things with simple tools and small data, and they were able to bring a lot of value to the organization. So again, it's how you're able to align those 5 dimensions on a scale of 0 through 5 with different criteria. And if you see an organization that is very, very ambitious, let's say on the scope and objectives dimension, they are super ambitious, but the other aspects are lower on the maturity scale, then your chances of success are very, very weak. You're aiming for trouble, and so on for the other dimensions. So the goal is, if you have one area or maybe 2 areas that are way higher than the others, but the rest is smaller, is lower on the maturity scale, or vice versa. You have one spot that is lower, well, guess what? You need to work on that in order to improve it. So if you see that your team and expertise is the lowest, maybe you need to hire, maybe you need some training, maybe you need some external partners, and so on. So, sorry, all of that throughout the years, all of that experience, and seeing agencies and people adopting the concept of digital analytics maturity, all led me to think about radical analytics. And there are 8 premises to radical analytics. And for the rest of this webinar, we're going to go into each of those areas, and I'm going to provide you some food for thought and some ideas. So let's dig into the first one. Digital analytics is dead. That's, you know, right from the start, we start with something kind of interesting. You know, why would I say that digital analytics is dead? Well, when we ask people how do you define web analytics, they came up with something. Then we asked how do you define digital analytics, and they came up with something else. And in the end, what I settled on is a simple definition of what is analytics. It's how an organization arrives at an optimal and realistic decision informed by data. And each one of those words is super important. The how an organization, you know, implies there are steps, there's a process, and arrives to something. There's a goal, there's a destination. The decision aspect is, well, you know, we don't do it just for fun. We do it because we want to have decisions in the end. And it's informed by data. It's not really data-driven because the data doesn't decide anything itself. Even when we have machine learning and artificial intelligence, essentially we, as humans, we delegate that responsibility or that role to a system. But usually it's better to talk about data informed because the manager will still make a decision based on other insight, other information that comes from experience, that comes from external factors like macroeconomics or politics. And then optimal and realistic is also super important because what we want to do is find the balance between what is the best solution and what realistically we can do. So if, as an analyst, you make recommendations that people don't act on, most likely it's because you haven't found the right balance between what is the best versus what are the constraints. If you knew what are the constraints, maybe your recommendation would be different. So it's a matter of finding what are the constraints and the limits to what you can recommend. Because if it was such a great recommendation, there would be absolutely no reasons not to do it. And that's one of the thing I see in the field is analysts saying, well, I make all those great analyses, but my manager never act on those. Well, guess what? It's because there's something you don't know. So next aspect is, okay, what is the ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve? Is your objective aligned to the ultimate goal? And the ultimate goal would be something related to what is the core business of your organization? Why is this company or organization, why does it exist in the first place? Which metrics are going to tell you that you are making progress? And, you know, most of the time, companies exist because they want to make more revenue, but they also want to reduce their costs, and those two things together will lead to some profit. But there's other factors that come into play. You know, we want to increase satisfaction, and the first thing that comes to mind is increased customer satisfaction. But think of it as if we have satisfied employees, they will work better and they will stay and they will produce more value. If we have satisfied investors, if we have satisfied government bodies because we respect the regulations in the law, we act responsibly in terms of being a good corporate citizen, for example. So satisfaction doesn't only apply to your customers, but it applies more depending on the audience that you're addressing. So this will lead to greater engagement. And if you combine profit and engagement, it means that your organization is going to be sustainable in the long term, right? So every analyst, every analysis, every metric should eventually lead back to one of those things. And if it leads to increase satisfaction, reduce cost, and increase revenue, it's going to be easier to act on, easier to measure than something that is a longer term ultimate goal, which is the survival of the organization. So a real business objective is not specific to a channel or a marketing, or it's not limited to a marketing function. So that's why when I define analytics, I'm dropping the word digital in front of it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's digital. Everything is digital anyway. And it doesn't matter if I need to use data from the call center or from the back office or from anywhere, from surveys and stuff like that. My role as an analyst is to understand the business context, find which data I can leverage, be creative about the recommendations and the solution I can bring to the table. This is what is analytics. Nothing should limit it to being, just web-centric or mobile or just Facebook or, whatever other way you want to look at it. We shouldn't limit ourselves to that. Of course, we develop expertise and we develop specialties, but what analytics is really business context, data, and creativity combined together to bring value to the organization. So another one that we can look into is DMAIC. What is this thing? And when we ask, is your job hard? Of course, people will say, yeah, it is difficult. But the thing is, ask anyone on the street, anyone anywhere, ask them if their job is hard. And of course, they're going to say, yes, my job is hard. It's difficult. There are challenges. But you know what? This is perfectly fine. If your job was easy, you wouldn't be there to do it. So our job is not supposed to be easy. Because when we look at what is analytics, we have a definition for that, but we do analysis. So what is analysis? Analysis is how we break something complex into smaller parts so that we can understand it. And if we can understand it, we can measure it. If we can measure it, we can improve it. Right? So this is what we do as a job. And there are ways, proven ways, to break something complex into small parts. And one of those proven ways to do it is called Lean Six Sigma. It's a set of practices used to systematically improve processes by eliminating defects. It uses a lot of segmentation, slicing and dicing of data. It's great for continuous improvement where the environment is changing. So this Six Sigma was created years ago for the manufacturing environment in order to improve manufacturing. But it actually applies, the concept applies to what we do. And there are 5 simple steps. The first one is define. Define what is the problem or what is the opportunity that you're trying to capture. Define the boundaries of that problem. Define a good objective, maybe a smart objective. Then measure is what kind of data is available, what kind of data we already have, and what kind of data we don't have. Do we have to do some quality assurance on the data? And we can already do at that stage, we can already look into some basic, very basic, patterns and trends. Are there any outliers? What are the maximum, minimums? What is the average? Things like that. Very simple, because we look at a single source of data and single elements. Then analysis is where we put our skills at work. It's where we try to find if there's any correlations, if there's any patterns, if there's any insight that we can gain out of it. That's where we really put our work into play. And when we talk about reporting usually is at the measure step. So we basically just take the data, make it look good, and spit it out on the other end into a report. When we talk about analysis, there's actually insight coming out of it. There's actually recommendation. There's actually action and decisions, just like in my definition of analytics. So analysis is super important, and that leads to recommendation for improvements. And that's where maybe we would do an A/B test or a multivariate testing. That's where we would, do optimization on the site. and in our campaigns and so on. And then we do control. Control is, since we've defined something to start with, the control is coming back to it and saying, well, did it actually work? Is it a sustainable benefit that we've put in place? So here we go. We have our define, measure, analyze, improve, control. So DMAIC is the acronym for those 5 steps. And what it does in the end is it reduces the cost of complexity and it increases velocity. And velocity is, what's the speed at which you can go through those 5 steps? If you reduce the time between the moment you find the problem and the moment you solve the problem, you have increased velocity. If you reduce the time between the moment you see an opportunity and the moment you can actually capture and do something about that opportunity, you've increased velocity. And if you increase velocity, then you bring more value faster to the organization. So, it's a way to be able to become very efficient at what we do. And you can take even the most complex problems and you're going to be able to break them down into small parts and go through those steps and bring value. So in the end, what we want to do is make it easy to do business with. I had a manager that kept telling me that. And you know what? There's even, the beauty of it is for Lean Six Sigma, there are books and training and, references online and all kind of information that you can leverage. So you don't have to create your own analytics methodology yourself. There's already something out there that you can start from. So the next one is never ask, always propose. And as I mentioned, there are maybe some aspects of radical analytics that some people, maybe you're going to say, no, that doesn't apply to me, and that's fine. But this is based on something that I've seen so often in the field. So what is never ask, always propose? What happens when you make a recommendation? You say, we should do this. Well, you go to your manager and you ask, here's my recommendation. Do you agree or you don't agree? And you're going to get a yes, no answer. So it's a binary choice. There's no other option. Either you do it or you don't. So it's a very limited possibility. And once a decision is made, there's usually, it's hard to revert that decision. On the other hand, if you just ask an open question, what is your objective? That's a really open question. What are your KPIs? It's an open question. They will make up something. They will tell you something. And sometimes the conversation is going to be about, well, I don't know, what kind of metrics, what kind of reports do you have? Oh, well, we have, about 120 different reports and 200 different metrics and so on. Well, I'm going to pick a little bit of that and a little bit of this. Let's measure this also because just in case we need it. Right? I see that so often. So the problem when we ask open questions is that we put ourselves in a position where we're going to be told what to do, but we won't be told why it's important from a business standpoint. While if we flip the conversation, if we, instead of coming with a yes/no question or just a wide open question, what if instead we made a proposal? What if instead we said, well, I've been looking into it. I think your objective should be something around those lines. What do you think about that? So at least you engage a conversation, and you can, from that, you can have a better understanding of why it's important, and instead of being told what to do. So sometimes we talk about reporting monkeys. It's a very negative term. If you are ever labeled that, oh, you're a reporting monkey, that's not really a good career opportunity, right? So a reporting monkey is essentially, someone who's been cornered into being told, oh, I need this report. Oh, give me this metric. They never tell you why it's important. They just ask for it. And this is not the right way to do it. So you want to flip the conversation around. So what I've started looking into is, instead of thinking in terms of making a recommendation and defining smart objectives, I've been looking into product thinking, which is essentially what startups are using in order to define new products for the market. So they start with the user first. What is the problem that we're trying to solve, and for who are we going to solve the problem? So who's the audience? What is the problem? Then why are we doing this? What is the vision? Why is it important for us? So now we started with the user first, but now we're thinking about, okay, what's in it for us as an organization, and what is the strategy? How are we going to do it? So when we combine the two, we have the problem solution fit. So we have a problem, we have an audience, and we have a way to solve the problem for that audience. So that's awesome. Then what is the output of that? What is the goal? What do we want to achieve? And how do we know that we've actually achieved it? So we can measure success. So you combine product thinking and the concept, and you have a nice statement. In order to achieve something, our vision, our product or service will solve a specific problem for a specific audience by giving them something they want, and we will know it works when we see this goal being achieved. So it's different from a smart objective. It's a different way to approach it. And what I like about it is that we start with the customer first, the user first in mind, and then we see how we can help them. So maybe that if you're able to fill the blanks in that statement, you will probably have a fairly good objective to start from and improve from there, right? Next aspect is eat your own dog food. When I worked for Microsoft for a while, and they had that mantra of eat your own dog food, which essentially means do what you preach. And as analysts and anyone who's done any project management, we know about the triple constraint model, where you have cost, time, and scope. So if you want to reduce cost, what are you going to do? Well, you can increase time, or you can reduce the scope. If you want to reduce the time, I want it faster, what can you do? You can increase the cost, so you put more resources at it, or you reduce the scope, so you can deliver faster. So when I talk to analysts, they usually complain about the fact that they have too much work. They're not able to deliver the quality they would like to. They get constantly asked to do additional tasks and so on. So why not do what you preach? Optimize your own job. So eat your own dog food. So if you were asked to cut 10% or 20%, whatever the percentage of your job, how would you do it? Would you be able to do it? There's that thing from Jack Welch when all the e-business and e-commerce was growing up. Obviously everything e-business was kind of challenging the old models, and Jack Welch came up with the idea of destroy your business. If you had to start your business again from scratch, how would you do it? What would you do differently? So think of your own job, because after all, the worst thing to do is to complain about our own job. If we keep telling my job is hard, basically we lose all credibility, because after all, if we want to improve and optimize the business, but we're not even able to improve and optimize our own job, there's zero credibility. So different ways of optimizing your own job. You could review the roles and responsibilities. You could identify all the tasks that you are doing and your team is doing, and see who is responsible, who is accountable, who is consulted and informed. So a RACI matrix, and you can look into it. The building a RACI matrix is a list of tasks. Who's, what is the person who has the role to actually do it and approve it and needs to be involved and so on. So that's one way to do improvement. But of course, you're going to need to set some time apart in order to do that. Learn to say no. That's one of the difficult things to do is, when someone in the organization comes to you and say, oh, I need this, I need that, well, you ask why they need it. Push back a little bit, but push back in a way that is constructive. So demonstrate that you want to understand why it's important, and maybe that's going to end up having more priority than something else. If you work with a task list, well, most likely the number of items on the list is higher than your ability to remove items from the list. So there's always more coming in, and there's no end to it. So what are you going to do to solve that? We can look at lean management, and there's the concept of the 8 wastes of lean. Eliminating defects, eliminating overproduction. In our area, one thing that I see is number 5, transportation. Taking data from one place and putting it into another place just because of what? If it doesn't bring any value, then why would we take data from one place and bring it to another place? Like extracting the data using an API and putting it into a data lake. That's fancy, that's trendy, that's cool, but does it really bring any value? Maybe it's worth asking the question. And then take the lead. Don't wait to be told what to do. Make propositions based on what you control, manage, and influence. And I'm going to get back to that point of control, manage, and influence because it's super important. So I mentioned a RACI matrix. So who's responsible, accountable, consulted, informed? The importance of that is you have your own role conception, what you think your job is. And then there's a disconnect with the expectation, what other people think that your job should be. And then there's another disconnect, and there's actually what you really do in your job. So all of that over time creates a lot of confusion about who's supposed to do what and why they do it and why it's valuable for the organization. And here's an example of an actual workshop that I conducted where we looked at what are, from a business standpoint, what are the outcomes and actions, what are the enabling capabilities, how do you make it possible, and the analysis aspect. And you see there's a lot of work being done on the enabling capabilities. So is it the most valuable work? Why do we spend so much time implementing tags and doing data quality and stuff like that, and so little time less time doing analysis and outcome and actions? Which brings me to the next one, don't seek executive buy-in. Another one that is a bit controversial. And Tom Davenport is really respected, and he wrote a book, Competing on Analytics, and there's an interesting statement in there. Becoming data-driven means that you change the culture of the organization. You change the behavior, and you need to impact the skills of many employees. So it's a major transition. It requires leadership from executives at the very top who have a passion for the quantitative approach. And so, when you read something like that, it's clear that you want to have executive sponsorship because it's a major transformation. So usually what happens is, yes, executive sponsors can overcome roadblocks. They can work on big issues, but they will also expect, novel solutions and grandiose projects. This requires more time, it's costly, and it's risky. And you get just a teeny fraction of the organization who actually have data-driven managers, senior managers. For the rest of the maybe 99% of the rest, usually it works better when it's a grassroots effort. The most disruptive innovation, the better ideas, oftentimes they come from the people who are actually doing the work. it's small experiments, small improvement. You can have quick iteration. So it's small, it's incremental, and this will add up. So it's a lot easier to improve 100 things by 1% than it is to improve a single thing by 100%. And the thing with, if you make small improvements, if you make 100 small improvements, actually the sum won't be 100. It's going to have an exponential effect, because every incremental improvement you do is going to add up to an exponential result. So yes, if you're lucky and you have executive sponsorship, that's great. But most of the time, you don't. So start from the bottom. So do you manage, control, and influence the underlying factors of success? So let's start with the control phase, the control aspect. The control aspect is what you actually do. You have control over it. You have the tools, you have the data, you know how to solve those, you know how to do those tasks. And your role should be to deliver more value at a lower cost. So again, that's how you would improve your own job, but also bring value to the organization by making recommendation for improving other tasks in the organization. And you can quantify your work because you have control over it. So it's a lot easier to measure what you control. The manage aspect is what you are accountable for, areas where, or tasks where you can allocate resources and you can motivate other people toward a common goal. You know, of course, if you have defined the goal in the first place. And then influence is areas where you're a subject matter expert. So maybe it's not directly what you are responsible or accountable for doing, but you are considered to be an expert in that subject. So those, once you control and manage those tasks, the other tasks where you have influence might be areas of potential growth as from a career standpoint, or just to bring more value to the organization. So what you control, manage, and influence has a huge influence over your ability to deliver value for the organization. Then we go into uncover the unknown unknowns. What it is, you know, there are things that we know. There's things that, oh, I don't know about that, and I can recognize that I don't know. But there's also things that you don't know that you don't know, that there's absolutely no way until you stumble on it, until you do an experiment, there's no way you could know what was hiding behind that. Right? So call it pilot project, call it proof of concept, or call it an experiment. Either way, it doesn't matter. But either way, what we want to do is remember what is the definition of analysis, is how to break something complex into smaller parts so that we can understand how it works. And when we do that, if we do a pilot project, proof of concept, or experiment, basically what we're trying to do is lower the risks. We're giving ourselves a right to fail, but really what it is, it's a right to learn, because you're going to find out something that you didn't know before. It's not a failure. If you do an experiment and in the end it doesn't work, you haven't failed anything. Now you know it doesn't work, and that's valuable. You learned something. And it allows you to think in terms of, just like a startup, think agile. Think what is the minimum viable solution that you can bring to the table in order to bring value faster, rather than having a super big project, right? So think in terms of the same philosophy as if you were a startup yourself within the organization, and your role is to bring value, which brings me to Agile. Embrace Agile or die. There's too often projects where, or organization where I see analytics as being almost like, okay, one day we will get there, but first we need to do this and that and so on, and they always postpone. There's always a reason to not do it today. So you will have those 12 principles in the slides. I won't go through all of them, but what I did is I looked at the 12 principles of Agile and from Agile development. So it's another area where we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can leverage concepts from Agile development and apply it to analytics. So what I've done is simply rework a couple of those statements to make them fit better with our field of expertise, which is analytics. And we're getting to the point of analysis are change agents. And the reason I'm saying that is, at the end of the day, what is the difference between a manager and an analyst? The big difference I see is that an analyst was given the privilege of making recommendations, but the manager has the power of decision. So imagine if you're the analyst and you make a recommendation. If you were the manager, would you say yes to your recommendation? If you wouldn't say yes to your own recommendation, then it's not a good recommendation. And what I see, I'm teaching MBA students and marketing masters, and what I see is there's going to be a breed one day, there's going to be a new breed of managers that will be more data-driven. They will be more data-informed. They will want to understand how analytics works, and they will give more trust to those recommendations. They will, empower their team to be maybe more self-sufficient or make more decisions because they will trust them. Which brings us to, the evolution or the career path of people in the field. Do you prefer to have people who have a depth of knowledge or breadth of understanding? So do you prefer to have someone who understands about the concepts of marketing or someone who's able to deep dive into something like Google Analytics? That's very different. Do you want to have people who have an understanding of, broadly speaking, what is the marketing mix and what is attribution, what is customer lifetime value? Or do you want someone who's going to be able to do super awesome, great campaigns on Facebook? Very different. So depth of knowledge, and you can apply that to the vertical industry for the organization that you work for. If you work in the automotive industry, do you want someone to have an understanding of marketing in general, or someone who has a deep knowledge of what is the automotive industry? That's very different. So over time, we need to develop we need to have a good balance in our team of people who have depth of knowledge and breadth of skills and breadth of knowledge. And getting close to the conclusion, I want to share with you the team dynamic aspect. So you saw a picture of a workshop where I mentioned business outcomes and actions. I mentioned enabling capabilities and analysis. So if we look at that, I'm using this way of presenting the team because it all starts from the business standpoint. They define the strategy and the goals, which are communicated to people who are going to be able to basically communicate business requirements and objectives to people who can bring it to life. They are the enablers. They understand the technologies. They understand the constraints of those technologies. They understand the information architecture, the features, how to put the tags on the website, how to use R and how to do SQL statement to extract the data. So they supply the means, the tools, and the data so that people with a stronger analysis mindset, maybe some statistics knowledge, a problem-solving approach, they are able to sanitize a lot of information and communicate effectively actionable insight and recommendation back to the business. So here's the point. The point is nobody is able to do all of that on their own. You likely have a strong point, a strong area, and you have maybe an area that, okay, I'm good at that, and then something that is, no, this is not what I want to do. This is not my ball game. I would rather have someone else do it. So the thing is, find in which areas you're most comfortable and go for that. You won't be able to do everything on your own. That's absolutely impossible. So if you think of someone, a data scientist, what is a data scientist? Well, it's someone who's super strong on the enabling capabilities because they understand the big data environment and the tools to leverage big data, but they are also very strong on the analysis side of things. because they can build data models and so on. Are they necessarily the best people from a business standpoint? Maybe not, and that's fine. If you think about a digital marketer will be strong on the business side of things, on the marketing side of things, and somewhat, usually fairly good on the analysis side of things. But typically, digital marketers, don't ask them to put the tags on the website because they don't know JavaScript. They don't know how to use, your tag management system. They don't know about APIs. Maybe they can do something about it, but that's not their ballgame. They would rather have someone else do it. If that other person can be very efficient, someone in their web development team or IT who's super awesome at putting the tags on a website. So you see the picture, right? So let's wrap up. Digital analytics is not a project. It's doing analytics is it's not a simple thing that you need to do. It's a way of life, as Guy Kawasaki was putting it. To become data driven as an organization, it cannot be a project. It cannot be a single person aspect. It cannot be just a CEO coming in or a senior manager saying, okay, here we go, from this day we're going to be data driven. So I've shared with you the radical analytics premises. There's 8 of them. You can give it a try. And hopefully, if I was going to start again and ask you what's your objective, maybe you have a smarter way to define an objective and think about all the things that we've seen. And you know what? As a bonus, there's this guy, David Parmenter, who wrote a ton of books on key performance indicators. Honestly, I never thought that there would be so many things to write about. But anyway, he wrote many books on key performance indicator, and there's something really useful on how to define KPIs. And just like a lot of the things that I mentioned, the point is we need to take a step back, think about what we do, and find ways to do it better. This is what digital analytics and what analytics is all about. Make things better, improve it, and start with your own job. So on this, thank you, and we can go for a couple of questions.
Excellent, and thank you, Stefan. That was wonderful. I always love these webinars because I'm always learning something new. It was such a wonderful, I love being in the learning community.
Yes, that's awesome.
At this point, I'm actually going to take over your screen, and we're going to start the poll that we do during the question and answer session.
Perfect.
And one of the questions, and I already see it hidden up there a couple places, is let me go ahead and launch the poll first. There we go. Is do we have a recording of the session, or can you go back and look at it? And yes, we do record all the sessions. If you go to Simplilearn.com and hit the support button, you can request a recording for this specific session, and they'll send you the link for that. It does take up to 12 hours. So if you want a copy of the recording, go to Simplilearn.com and under support. We have some great questions coming in. I'm going to start with a couple from Paraz. I hope I said the name correctly. The first one is at the beginning of your session, you had a 5-point kind of star up.
Yes.
And, he wanted to know what the name of that. How would you name this star approach? Is data-driven, scope and objectives, team and expertise, that one?
So it's the digital analytics maturity model, and you can go to digital analytics. Oh no, I'm not sharing my screen. But if you go to bit.ly, and you will get the link in the presentation, you can go to bit.ly/DAMSAT in uppercase, and you will get to the digital analytics website.
Okay, excellent. Give me just a moment to scroll down here. And then during the course, you had a lot of questions. You had a lot of mentions. Like we talked about digital analytics or data analytics. We talked about Lean Six Sigma.
Yes.
We talked about different PMP and stuff like that. What kind of certificates or course or learning would you suggest to an individual who is just starting out into the field and they're trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do, and what I want to be in analytics? I want to go in there and I want to help companies solve their problems. Where do I start?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what's interesting is until recently there were very, very few training and formal academic education available to become a digital analyst. And things are changing. Of course, we see there's a lot of training around data science, how to become a data scientist and so on. But it's different. It's slightly different than what we do. We tend to be more on the marketing side of things, and we tend to be much more about leveraging, digital data from websites, mobile, and so on, which doesn't refrain us from the other sources of data and doing more. So I would start with, the first question to ask is, what drives you? So if I go back to the team dynamics slide where I have that triangle, what drives you in the morning? Is it a good technical challenge? I have a technical background. I was a computer scientist, and eventually I went to do an MBA. So I went from the very technical side of things, of being a system administrator, a webmaster at one time, so very technical, but eventually went to do an MBA because I wanted to understand more about the business. So what drives you in the morning? Is it the business challenge, the technological challenge, or the statistics and the analysis aspect? Once you know that, that I think will help you define or find out what kind of training you need to look into. And of course, on Simplilearn, you have a ton of different opportunities for learning about project management, learning about statistics, learning about, of course, marketing in general and digital marketing specifically. So there's a lot of training that you can get from there. But I think it starts with, first, what you won't be able to do everything. So find what aspect drives you in the morning. Right?
Oh, that's excellent advice. I could have used that about 30 years ago.
Yeah, me too.
That might date me a little bit. Yeah. And you start because I remember, back in the 80s, it was whoever your teacher was. They gave you advice and
Yes.
told you where to go, and you
Yeah.
realize that we're in such a different world, and there's so
Yeah.
many different moving pieces.
And I would say also the other thing is, when I go to conferences and I talk to so many people, what I see today is that very few people were actually trained formally or informally to do what they do today. So nobody stumbled onto something that magically made them being digital marketer and digital analyst. They have backgrounds in all different kind of field. They have, some of them, yes, of course, they have background in marketing and statistics and so on. But many people have backgrounds in psychology, in English literature, for example, in philosophy, all kind of thing that you would think at first that never prepared those people to work in that field, but they do, and they enjoy it.
Excellent. And that's kind of my experience too over the years. I
Mm-hmm.
certainly am not where I started at when I went to college or any of that. Very,
Mm-hmm.
very different world than I ever thought I'd be in.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Make yourself your own project. I like that. Make yourself your own project.
Yes, yeah. Think of yourself as a startup. Your role
Um,
is to increase your value in the market, have fun doing it, and be compensated, at a decent level so that you can make a living. But think of your own career as a business. That will change a lot of things in the way you develop your career path.
Excellent. Oh, that's excellent advice. We have a couple more uh, specific questions as far as the industry. And specifically, both of them are from e-commerce, and I guess
Mm-hmm.
one of them, let me just go back up here. Um, they're looking for an example in e-commerce for when you're talking about digital analytics is dead. How does it optimal realistic decisions?
Mm-hmm.
And can an organization sustain it only on profit? So if you're in e-commerce, is there a point where you're just based on the profit as your final goal, or is that something that is there a niche?
Well, that I
Not
would
sure.
say that can only work for some time, because if your only goal is to make a profit, but you don't have enough consideration for the satisfaction aspect, then eventually that's going to erode. Yes, you're going to make some revenue for some time, but eventually, there's going to be your reputation, there's going to be customer satisfaction, there's going to be, all kinds of aspects. And today with social media and the ease of destroying a brand, I don't think working solely on revenue, and if we extend the idea, there's a lot of questioning about the model of companies that are always working to show just a greater return on investment for the investors. That works for so long, but eventually they need to be sustainable in the long run, and sustainability also involves having customers who are satisfied, but also investors who are satisfied, right? And employees who are satisfied. So I don't, in an e-commerce context, yes, of course, you want to improve profitability, but there needs, like, if I have to define a dashboard and define KPIs, I will always have something that will relate to other factors, like, be it net promoter score, be it customer satisfaction, whatever you want to use, but there needs to be something else related to satisfaction.
Excellent, excellent. For anybody who's doing a startup, because startups take a lot. I've worked with a lot of startup companies myself, and if you don't have that full field of expertise, it's amazing how easy it is to get stuck.
Yes.
In a startup, and then finding that those people who have skills that complement your own is so important. And that's true of any business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it might be better to for a startup, for example, if your core business is, it might just be wiser to find someone who's going to take care of your web analytics implementation, for example. Don't waste your time trying to do it yourself. Just find someone. There's different levels of skills and prices in the market. You can find someone who's going to be very cheap. You can find someone who's going to cost more, and they will bring different levels of expertise and value. But if you've never done any, and that's usually what I say to all my clients is, and when I speak at conferences, that if you've never done a web analytics implementation, find someone to help you out, do it for you, and maybe shadow what they are doing, but don't try to do it yourself, because there's no way you're going to get it right.
Excellent advice. That's excellent advice. Certainly, don't reinvent the wheel. One of the common sayings. Let's go ahead. I got just a couple more questions, so we'll go a few minutes over time. And I did close a poll, so if you need your screen to show something, we have that.
Okay.
So kind of a little bit more on the difference between data analyst and data scientist. How are those different?
Yeah.
And
well, maybe I can just bring that slide. You see my screen?
Yes, your screen's coming up.
So yeah, data scientists they tend to have a broader skill sets in terms of enabling capabilities. So how to leverage the technology related to big data. So be it Hadoop or BigQuery or R, but so they know about those tools. They were trained and they have the knowledge how to build models from scratch, from the raw data. They understand a lot about statistics. They understand a lot about, for example, building predictive models. But they tend to have less knowledge about the specifics of the business. So basically, you provide, and maybe it's a bit of a stereotype, but you give them some interesting data, and they know how to use the right tools to extract value out of that data using statistical models. So that's how I see data science. Digital analysts, they tend to be more on, they tend to have typically more knowledge about marketing, but I wouldn't limit it to marketing, but usually they have more knowledge about the marketing aspect and the specific business they're in. So if they are in the automotive industry and so on. But maybe they don't know as much about core statistics concepts. I was surprised when I asked web analysts at the time, a couple of years ago, I asked web analysts how much math and stats do you need to know in order to be a good web analyst, and surprisingly the answer was, well, you don't need to know much because the tool is going to tell you. So we see a difference between digital marketers and digital analysts who wants to use a black box that will give them the result versus data scientists who actually want to build that black box, right? So that's two very important components. And when we use tools like Google Analytics and Adobe Analytics, we use a black box. We don't need to be data scientists in order to use those tools. While people working at Google and working at Adobe building those tools, of course, they need to be more of a data science profile.
Excellent. Yeah, that's kind of what I always see in the industry. It's wonderful. I like the way you put it. It definitely spells it out, makes it a lot easier for people who are looking to figure out where they're going, either individually or as a company. I mean, knowing this stuff, and if you're working with a large group of people, being able to see what their strengths are and how to leverage that is really important.
And I guess the worst thing to do would be to say, oh, we need big data. I've heard that. We need big data. Well, no, you don't need big data. What you need first is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And maybe big data is going to be one of the enabling capability that you need in order to solve that problem. But it starts with the business first. What is the question? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Then let's see what are the tools that we can use to do it, to solve it.
Heck, it actually sounds like a business meeting I had yesterday morning. He was asking me, can I leverage Hadoop into this? Because I specialties in Hadoop. And I said, well, how much data are you leveraging?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, well, is it more than a terabyte? He goes, no.
Well, yeah.
Probably don't need something that big. And I said, well, what are you going to leverage out of? He goes, I don't know.
Yeah, just open Excel and do it there.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you can run that right in Excel just fine.
I've been quoted, the simplest definition of big data ever. I came up with the answer to that. Whatever doesn't fit in Excel. This is big data. Because when you think of it, as soon as you have to get out of Excel, everybody knows Excel. But when you have to get out of Excel because the problem is too big, then you have to rethink the way you solve the problem, and you have to think about maybe different tools that you need to solve the problem. So to me, that's a very simple transition. When Excel isn't good enough anymore to solve your problems, maybe that's where you start to lean toward using new tools like maybe Tableau or big data concepts.
Excellent. One last quick question here before we go ahead and close the session. We're about 7 minutes
I could
over.
go on and on.
Oh, I love this stuff. This is why I enjoy these webinars. What's your opinion on MS in data analytics? Is a hands-on experience better at teaching data analytics than coursework? This is like an interesting question that we all deal with when we're learning is, am I going to learn more from going to a course, or am I going to learn more from actually doing it?
I think you need both. There was an interesting article about how Google Analytics ruined marketing. And the premise, the argument behind it, and I think it makes some sense, is that a lot of people learned about digital analytics because they went into something like Google Analytics, and that's where they learned about it. But they learned about a tool, and they learned about how a tool approach analytics to bring some value, right? But do those people know about marketing concepts? Do they know about statistics? They might be awesome at using a tool, but do they understand what are the implications that a tool like Google Analytics brings or surface, right? So yes, you can learn, you can go to a course that will be really specific to whatever tool that you use, and you're going to be able to put it into action, maybe faster and right away. But we should never underestimate the importance of having this T shape, right? So you might be super good at Google Analytics, but if you don't understand the marketing concepts and the statistics and the other aspects of optimization, project management, a lot of the things that I talked about, if you don't have a minimum understanding of those things, I think in the long run, you won't have the best career opportunity that you might have otherwise. Right?
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that's so true in juggling your own life and businesses. That's all excellent. I love the way you present that. We have gone over. And I know we have a few people who've already left the thing because they probably have their own stuff going on in their
Yeah,
lives
for
from these
sure.
webinars,
Mhm.
or they finished their glass of wine if it's evening where they're at. Um, and Paras, you're very welcome. He was telling you thank you very much for answering a lot.
Welcome.
A lot of those questions came from him.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar now. I want to thank everybody for being here. We greatly appreciate you, Stefan, for your expertise.
Welcome.
And
My
we
pleasure.
appreciate all the attendees for being here also, and we look forward to seeing you in our classes.
All right.
Uh,
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
all right, take care. Bye-bye.